Welcome back to the third episode of the Mindful Psychonaut podcast. Today is going to be a little bit about the psychology of psychedelics, or at least, I guess, talking about how they can relate, and also a little bit about what some of the general findings are in terms of psychological research in psychedelic use. And I got to start off with a note from a podcast I listened to recently, where Jordan Peterson had a chat with Roland Griffiths, who is a very big name in psychedelic research and has spent a lot of time and has done numerous studies regarding psychedelics and the typical mystical experience or psychedelic experience that many will experience on psychedelics. And that is that the top is generally a mystical experience, whether it be through LSD or psilocybin, is rated as kind of the top five most meaningful events of someone's life, which, when you've had psychedelics, you can truly understand why that might be. If you haven't, I think you've really got to consider that. You've got to consider, okay, this is top five. That's alongside other life-changing experiences like childbirth or loss of a loved one, maybe even kind of near-death experiences. All of these events are very meaningful, and to put the psychedelic experience in with that really shows the extent that this area can have, the potential for change, and the significance of these experiences. It's not just put alongside other drugs, because it is generally considered a drug, but when you consider it to be in these top five most meaningful events of someone's life, you've got a lot to think about there, and I think there's a lot more that we have yet to understand about psychedelics. And that was around 80 to 90% of the participants reported that that mystical experience was one of their top five most important experiences of their life so far. And that was true whether the experience was good or bad. Now, there's a lot of arguments deciding whether there is a good or bad experience because of these findings, or because of if you have a really good experience, then you can really learn from that, and generally most people enjoy good experiences. It's in the name of describing it as good. But if you were to describe it as a bad experience, maybe it's quite a traumatic thing. It's maybe you remembering or thinking about past experiences. Maybe you had to deal with some thoughts that you didn't want to deal with, but you still, if you are in that psychedelic experience, whether it's mushrooms, you might be in that for 6 hours or so, 6 to 8 hours, LSD maybe even longer, a couple of hours longer, you're going to have to deal with it, unfortunately. But whether the experience was good or bad, it was still among those top five life-changing experiences, which really goes to show, even if you're quite scared about taking a psychedelic, if you were to, knowing that even if you have a bad time, even if this day is really scary, really not good to go through, actually, there's probably a reason for it. There's probably a reason for those bad things arising. It may be that the set and setting that you were having your psychedelic experience in was not appropriate. You were with strangers. You weren't in a comfortable environment. Take this for example. I'm in a forest. I think I'd be very happy doing it here, but then you're not in the comforts of your own home. There's a lot of things to think about, but generally, if you get your set and setting right, if you are having a bad experience or have had one, then generally you'll be able. There are reasons for it, and I think after that experience, you definitely will spend time thinking about that, and I think that contributes to that life-changing, most meaningful events of someone's life. And this has been used, psychedelics have been used in the treatment of people in end-of-life treatments. So cancer patients near death, depression, anorexia, and nicotine addiction. A lot of the psychedelic research has been around those areas and has been very effective. To think that you can be on your deathbed, or know that you have 1 month to live, for example, and to take a psychedelic substance and that to reduce your fear of dying. I mean, that's incredible. I don't think we ever properly talk about death. It's just something that arises, and then you talk a little bit about it, either maybe in the upcoming to someone's death, or after someone's died. It's something that is part of life and death. They come together, and talking about it more and actually coming to terms with what that means is very difficult, very complicated. And I think psychedelics allow you to open up a bit more to just the reality of experience. You are just this you can't really say you are this being. You are simply just experiencing what you experience. It's very difficult to say that you are this body. I am me, this is my body, which in some regards is true, but you are simply experiencing to have a body. You are experiencing that you have arms and that you see these things, but when it comes down to it, actually everything that you experience is just arising. And it's quite a strange, abstract thought to think about, because we are so in touch with our ego, in a sense. But actually, the ego as well is an experience. It is something that is arising, something that we've created to help deal with the world and what it is. And actually, sometimes in a psychedelic experience, that ego can be dissolved. You can be stripped bare of your ego, or it may start to pull away from you, and that might be quite scary. You become, I guess, more raw to the experience. A lot of people talk about oneness, raw to the experience of what is around you and who you are, what you are, and it's quite scary. And I think if you're not open to the experience of if you're not open to experiencing what will occur during a psychedelic or mystical experience, you may have a bad time. You may try to hold on to those egoic, if that's a word, egoic properties that you may have. But if you can let go of that, if you can almost just focus slightly less on who you perceive yourself to be, and more on what you are currently experiencing, it can be very rewardful. And these mystical experiences do lead to reductions in anxiety, depression, and has also been shown to reduce proclivity for substance use, which is very interesting and probably quite relevant to most people, I think, dealing with the anxieties and stresses of kind of life and death, and the world in which we live regarding that, I guess, reality. There is life and death, or at least in a physical sense. Some people, or a lot of people, will turn to substances to alleviate some of those stresses, to change the way that they think or feel, to distract them, maybe. So to have a substance which you do take, but then can actually reduce your need or want to take other substances like smoking or alcohol, it's quite interesting. You really I guess if you are dependent on those substances like alcohol or smoking, and especially if they're addictive, I think you have this internal battle of constant conflict. I guess you know that something is bad for you, yet you still do it. What brought you to that conclusion? And it comes back to something that Jordan Peterson talks about a lot, in the sense that you want to try and look after yourself as if you were looking after someone else. And if someone had decided that they were just going to take this thing to deal with their current issues, but then know that actually it is causing loads of other issues, I don't think you'd be happy with that if it was someone else. So to apply that to yourself is quite a difficult thing, having that internal conversation with yourself. So to have a psychedelic experience and almost to have that conversation reduced, to be able to think clearer and be able to have a reduced need for those substances, really, I guess, shows quite a lot about the nature of that experience. And it does get you curious, or it got me curious about the experience of consciousness, and I guess just the limits that we perceive to have in consciousness. If mindfulness is a great experience to be able to, I guess, become less distracted, or allow yourself to focus more and become less distracted. But I definitely see psychedelics as a foot in the door to learning what consciousness has to offer, and expands the brackets of your experience. Obviously, I guess, the dualistic sense of life and death, there's a very high and there's a low. Like, generally, life is considered a good thing, but death is considered a bad thing, or at least there are good things and bad things that we experience. I think the psychedelic experience really expands the brackets to which that you can experience. You can experience far greater things, or at least far more often. You have far more. I think actually it's associated with more creativity after a psychedelic experience, which is very interesting. The I like to describe it as almost going down tracks in the snow. Your normal train of thought is these just confined tracks in the snow which you keep going down day in, day out. I am this person, I do these things. Maybe you have too many drinks and you feel guilty the next day, but you just got used to those tracks of do these things, feel guilty, shrug it off afterwards, and then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, and it's just normal. But actually, and that can be applied to anything. Your thought processes when you're seeing someone, when you're talking to someone out and about, they are very confined and very normal, or at least you have what your normal is in these tracks. And then to have a psychedelic experience, you can start making new tracks in the snow. You can be more creative, and you can start to think differently. The ways that your mind may have been opened during that experience, I think then you can almost apply that openness to experience outside of the experience itself. I found that my first LSD experience was almost what sparked the interest to explore and learn more about what consciousness has to offer, or at least having the brackets expanded, going down the different tracks in the snow is incredible. It's very life-changing, and it really almost highlights the lack of understanding that you truly have about yourself, or who you call what you call yourself, and just the amount of ways that it can be applied in daily life is it is quite amazing. And so these altered states of consciousness can be experienced through a variety of ways. Obviously, like I said, I think psychedelics is the foot in the door. It is the you know that if you're going to have an experience with whether it's LSD or mushrooms, you know that in 1 hour's time from when you take it, or 2 hours time, or just that the day after you've taken it, you are going to be slightly different. You will have gone through an experience that you're not necessarily going to be able to control. It's just going to happen, and that's quite scary. It is quite scary, but it can also get those altered experiences through other means. Like I said, mindfulness is a useful one. I really think that mindfulness has allowed, or at least practicing mindfulness and applying it throughout my daily life, not just I sit down and do 10 minutes of meditation. It is I sit down, do 10 minutes of meditation, and almost know how to be mindful, so then when I am out and about doing things, I can be mindful and present in whatever I'm doing. Being able to carry that over into the psychedelic experience is, I think it allows you to be more open to the experience. but also allows you to get more out of the experience, be able to be mindful of how you feel, what you are actually experiencing, rather than I think a lot of people might almost panic during the experience because it's so different, so abstract, and so different to the norm. To be open, to be mindful, and to just say this is the experience, and to be present to whatever is happening, whether you're seeing kaleidoscopic patterns or whether you're feeling some level of disassociation to your body, and whether you've almost certainties that you've had about life have been crumbled and torn away, and actually now you don't know what to do with yourself. You can be mindful of that and almost just accept the experience for what it is. Really feel. You can be okay if it is a bad experience. You can be mindful of that and say, like, and almost just feel those bad emotions, or feel those anxieties, the upset that you might have, and just truly experience that, because it is important to experience those things. And given how different the psychedelic experience can be, I find the application of mindfulness is very applicable in that sense. In the Waking Up app that I use, Sam Harris talks about trying to when you are being mindful and being mindful of the experiences that you have, you're closing your eyes, you can still see. The visual field is darkness, it is different, like you're still experiencing sight, you're still experiencing sound, you're experiencing all these different sensations, but when it comes down to it, when you close your eyes, because I think we are very visual creatures, when you close your eyes, it is just a cloud of sensation that you experience when you are truly focused on, whether it's the breath or maybe it's just maybe you're focusing on how your body feels sat on the ground. Like maybe for me right now, I'm feeling my bum on the ground going pretty numb, or my feet on the ground as well, just being able to feel everything like this. And it's not, where is that experiencing happening? Where are you experiencing that? And actually, even thoughts and your sense of self, and it's all just arising as a cloud of sensation with no location necessarily. So to apply that in a psychedelic experience with this completely different cloud of sensations, or altered cloud of sensations, you can really, even if it is quite scary, quite different, you can accept it a little bit better and just experience it for what it is. And I think the psychedelic experience really does make you question the experience of self, question how you feel, or at least how you perceive yourself to others. I think we get very, very caught up on, and some people never really get out of it, on how they are perceiving, how they perceive themselves in the eyes of others. That's their main focus. How does my hair look today? Am I wearing the right clothes? There's so many different things. Am I acting in a certain way? And there's so much abstracted thoughts about how I am perceived to others, and that's important in some sense, but it's also very important just to be mindful of the present experience that you are in, and to have that almost ego dissolved a little bit. You can have full ego death on psychedelic experiences, but to have who you call yourself adjusted, or to even just question that. I don't think many people question who they are, but when you do question who you are, it is quite a difficult thing to deal with, because it's something you built up since the day you were born. you built it up as you are. You're called by your name since the day you're born, and that can really almost be ingrained with you quite heavily. So to have that broken down a little bit, or even just to start thinking about who you really are, it is very life-changing. And I think it brings about good change. There will be things that you think about, and you may think about them and go, well, why am I stressing about the way I look, or the way that I might think other people? Why am I acting in a certain way just to fit a bracket of looks that people think I need to be in, or that you think people want you to be in? It definitely came to me in some sense when I was training last year. I always, I guess, considered myself to be the gym guy out of the group, the trainer, whereas actually it's something that I do, and to associate myself so closely with that for 5-6 years, to then almost disassociate myself from that, at least pull away from it quite a bit, just in the sense of who I am. It was quite scary, but the change that I have had from it has been really, really quite beneficial. Yeah, but that's just one experience, and I think there's a lot. Just the initiation of thinking about yourself and thinking about the nature of experience is really important. And yeah, before taking psychedelics, it is very important to be open to the experience, ready to learn. I think some people like to have intentions before they obviously get the set and setting, which is important, and they may write out some intentions that they want to tackle during their experience. I think that's entirely appropriate. There's a lot of things. You can probably think about those intentions quite well if you did have any. I also think it's quite amazing, or just it's quite appropriate to just go in not really knowing what you're going to get out of it, but knowing that you want to learn about the nature of the experience. Yeah. It's important to be interested and curious. I think being scared of the potential upcoming experience and being curious are going to come kind of hand in hand, especially if you are doing a if you, maybe it's your first time, or if you're doing a higher dose, you are still very unaware of what may be. It may be that you take this way too high dose than you thought you could handle, and you can't do anything about it, and you're just going to have to wait and see. You're just going to have to wait and see. And there's a lot of curiousness and excitement in not knowing what the experience may be, the profound thoughts that you may have, the visuals that may kick in, just the reality of that experience. That, yeah, it's, I think it's just, you need to be open to learning from that experience, and just open to experiencing the experience, trying not to be distracted. You definitely get quite a lot out of it. And I think it really comes down to it. You are going to experience things that you have never experienced before, or you are very unlikely to have experienced before. Things like DMT experiences, for example. A lot of people describe almost the presence of sentient beings, with similar descriptions to that of godlike experiences, which, even as I say them now, seems impossible. It doesn't seem like the nature of me sitting in this forest now, for me to be able to take something and then for that to be completely dissolved and almost completely eradicated, and I meet God, for example. That, whether you're religious or not, sounds impossible, but you need to be open to it. If something like that does happen, you need to accept it. You need to accept what you've experienced, because I think we're all too easy to brush off things that we experience, whether they be kind of crazy things or just normal things. I think we easily just say, oh yeah, that was just... Yeah, I think with a DMT experience especially, is to have these descriptions of godlike experiences. I don't know whether religious people would accept that is the God that they are, that they believe in, or whether it's just the drug making them hallucinate. There's I guess there's this, the main point to take out of that is there's a lot yet to learn, and there is a lot yet that we have not experienced, and to experience something like that really does change and shift the way that you may act and perceive the world. From that podcast, once again, Jordan Peterson said that exposure to threatening or disgusting objects or obstacles are considered curative. That which you approach voluntarily shrinks as you approach it, and that obstacle therefore shrinks. And I think that's really true. I think a lot of people will know that is true, whether they act it out or not. And if they don't know that's true, that's probably because they're scared to act it out. If you are scared of jumping off a cliff into the water, actually, if you are scared of that, that seems like quite a big obstacle. But if you were to jump off and approach that experience, actually the next time you did that, the obstacle of jumping off a cliff would be less, and you would probably grow from that experience. You would be less fearful of that experience, and the same with, you can apply that to anything, but that's just one example. And I think that is really important during these mystical experiences that you may experience, just in the sense that if there is something that scares you, whether it's a thought, whether it's beings that you may see, just approach it. I think you may do this in dreams. I think as a child you may have had repetitive nightmares, or some people still do. And actually the best way to combat those nightmares, or those fears that you may have of the monster under the bed, is to almost just approach them. If something is scaring you in a dream, if you approach that thing, or if you're scared of dying in a dream, if you just accept that you're dying, I think it all becomes a lot easier. And that can definitely be applied throughout life. And what I was talking about with the sense of oneness before, further research by Roland Griffiths show that these mystical experiences are associated with a sense of unity, a sense of sacredness, and a noetic sense. So there's a lot of, I guess, after the experience, interconnectiveness, whether that's internally and actually you feel very in touch with yourself, or whether that's externally and then you're very in touch with you and the world, or at least you and everything else. I think also you've also got that sense of sacredness, which is that kind of how profound and precious that experience is. I think because of that profound and how unbelievably different that experience is, you are definitely likely to be more open. It's associated with increases in trait openness, which is also associated with creativity. So I have found myself to be more creative. I don't want to, the research says this, and I also feel that. But it's, that definitely combining with the top 5 experiences of life, I think I'm definitely more creative and open to different experiences. And finally, obviously, the noetic sense, the sense of the feeling of truth. I think a lot of people are so set in stone about the way the world is, whether it's that everyone you meet is out to get you, and people are jerks and they're mean and things like that, or whether everyone is actually kind at heart but has all these life stresses and actually they're just dealing with that first before they deal with you properly. I think the experience can really change the way that you feel about, you may have had this set in stone feeling about the world, and then come into this mystical experience, and actually the thing that you feel there and then may be very different, but it feels very true. Personally, I think there is definitely a sense of oneness just in the sense that you're very vulnerable. You realize your vulnerabilities. You are just inside this body, and this body has its limits, and you are very reliant upon other people and society and the way that things have been structured so that you can go about your days living. But yeah, and that's pretty much all I've got for this episode. It's been a bit of a rant. Hopefully it's been slightly structured, and hopefully the birds in the background haven't been too loud. But apart from that, this podcast is now on Spotify, so if you are listening to it on there, brilliant. It's weird having a podcast on Spotify alongside. I'll listen to Joe Rogan on Spotify, and my podcast is also up there. So it's I don't know. It feels like a step up, but also quite exciting at the same time. So if you have enjoyed this podcast, then do let me know. And if you do have any other questions or other topics that you'd like me to cover, then also do let me know. But apart from that, hopefully you've enjoyed, and hopefully you'll tune in for the next episode.